Okay, everybody. So first of all, thank you so much for watching. I am so excited to talk about this movie, Women is Losers. And I have three very special guests. First of all, the director, Lisette Feliciano, Miss Lorenza Iso, and David Ortiz. Welcome to the Dana Cortez Show. How are you?
We're great.
We're fantastic. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for just doing this. You know, David and we've been talking on social media for a long time. I feel like we're really good friends. And he came to see me at an event in LA and told me about this movie. And he was so passionate about speaking on what it entailed of and how hard it was to get it together. I thought I have to watch this movie. You know, as a Mexican American, una Latina, we know how difficult it is to see our culture in mainstream media. So I thought I've got to watch it. And I have to admit, I laughed, I cried, I reminisced, I felt so many different emotions. Who wants to go first in talking about how the movie came about and what went into finally getting it produced?
That's a
Lisi,
lot.
vamos.
Lisa, you got to go
Okay,
first.
I'll go first, and then it just feels because we're all such like partners. Like looking at the screen and seeing Lorenza and seeing David, it's just like it's family here. So, yeah, thank you for having us. What happened was, it was a labor of love for sure. I had a conversation. I had been working in the industry for a couple of years, and I was noticing that for some reason my advancement was not on the similar trajectory to peers with the same level of experience, if not less. And I started thinking, okay, maybe it's just I'm not that good and this isn't for me. And I had to go home and tell my mother that. And she'd been, I mean, she's a Latina mom, so she'd been with me through this process since day one. Like she helped me get into NYU and she was the only one that supported me. And so I had to go to her and say, I'm sorry, but I failed you was really hard. And then she told me, yeah, that was not a fun conversation.
Well, you had all this self-doubt because of the
Yeah,
rejection and the inability to move ahead in your industry.
exactly. And it just seemed very targeted at me. So then, but what she said, and I'll give her the credit to this and to all the moms out there, she kind of just stopped me in my tracks and really opened up to me finally about everything that had happened to her in the 60s and 70s, a time period of the film, as she was trying to make it in the real estate industry. And what struck me was how similar what I was telling her happened to me what's happening to me now is what had happened to her then.
Right.
And so that's how I wanted to create, that the film. I wanted that eye-openingness that I had with her. I wanted to create that into this film. And then it was very difficult because we had to find like it's a breaking the dimension, it's a breaking the fourth wall, and it needs the type of person like Lorenza Izzo who can come in and just be a chameleon through all of those different pieces. And it's also an impossible film to produce because it's like it just doesn't. I always say like it's an unpitchable film, but we just had to make it, and it's possible because of the two people on the screen here with me.
Why do you think it's unpitchable? Is it here are my thoughts, and you can say if you agree or you disagree, and of course give your own answer. Is it the gatekeepers that don't understand our culture, our story? Is that why it's unpitchable?
I feel like David should answer that one because he's been around through this much longer than we have.
David, what are your thoughts on that? On
Yeah.
approaching different studios, different people who invest in this kind of thing, and they're like, "Well, I don't know." Where does that come from? The I don't know.
I mean, it's unfortunately the system that Hollywood has created over years, over decades, right? Is about filtration, right? And it's been about nepotism, and it's about quote unquote relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a story that, quite frankly, I don't know. And I said this to Lisa very, very early on. I don't know if she had pitched me this story or if she had given me this script or if I had seen the short film that it was based on, that I would have said, okay, great, let's make that movie. And full disclosure, it just so happened that at the right time, when we met, she just left such an impression. And then she shared the film with me after, similar to how we met. I just sort of, I couldn't, like, I just had to learn more, right? I just had
Right.
to, like, persistence to the point of annoyance is something that's always been kind of a trademark of mine.
That's the only way we make it in this business, though. Sorry, persistence.
We like to call it a New York hustle, I suppose. But it's just something that with everyone that that has seen the movie, it's just a matter of thankfully now we're at a point where movies are no longer greenlit based on box office and international potential, and again these myths that are perpetuated throughout the industry over the years, where there was always this idea that there was a quote unquote formula that involved the foreign value of someone's box office.
Right.
And through streaming services and technology, that has now obviously shifted tremendously. And so we're just really grateful that now we have the opportunity to share this tremendous story that was executed so brilliantly by these two women and the team behind that worked with them. So I'm just grateful to have been a part of it.
I want to talk to Lorenza, but I do want to say something really quick, Lisette, that you alluded to when you said for some reason I can't, I couldn't move ahead. I just did a story today on the fact that Latinas face the greatest wage gap in the country. And I really attribute this to a lack of presence in mainstream media. I'm the only Mexican American in the country with an English formatted show that's syndicated nationally on the radio. There is no other. There's been no one before. It's very sad. I love saying, "Oh, I'm the first," but it's also sad because it's not for a lack of talent. It's for a lack of opportunity. And we kind of had to do what you did. I just had to go do it on my own. We started our own company. And the perception that is constantly fed to us in media that has not changed. There was a 20-year study done. The LA Times just posted it. We're either maids or nannies or cholas, gangsters,
I was
and
just talking about that in an interview. Just
She
talking about
was.
that.
so unfortunate. So Lorenza, next question for you. When they, hey, here you've got this great movie. Was there any doubt in your mind that you wanted to be a part of this?
No, absolutely not. I read it and I knew right away because of the same things you were just mentioning. I think, the Latinos as a community, we're such a complex community. It's not so black and white. It's all around, all kinds of colors, all kinds of cultures. We're composed of such a complex history. So we're so rich actually in culture and varied. And I think for a long time, the gatekeepers and the studios have never understood that there's actually a very big market there. There's a huge market. I mean, in the horror genre, Latinos are the highest paying ticket holders. We move that needle. And unfortunately, it comes down to people like you, to Lisette, like Dave, to really push these stories that unless we do it ourselves, it's not going to happen because there's not a real, like you said, there's a lack of representation all around media. So for me, when I read the script, and as an actor, by the way, I've seen it all change. I moved to LA to pursue my American dream and my Hollywood dream around 8, 9, 10 years ago.
You're like maybe a decade.
My first job was for the first Netflix show ever. And I was so lucky to have that experience. And I've kind of seen it all happen, back when Netflix wasn't Netflix. Right. And from an actor's perspective, the roles available to me were exactly what you were saying. Chola, but then for the Chola, I wasn't Chola enough. The nanny, but then for the nanny, I wasn't nanny enough. I was too Latina, not Latina enough, but she's got blue eyes. She's not got brown eyes. And I mean, I can't even, it's such a complex process to navigate because you're having to convince the people that represent you that you can play that. I mean, my team has been amazing. Like they
that's so scary to me, Alyssa, that you're like trying to convince them you're a Latina woman. You're like, but I am. I'm not.
And by the way, on the spectrum, I'm on the luckiest side because I'm a white Latina. So I'm on the lucky side.
Exactly.
My other peers is not like that. I've had a privilege that other actors don't have. So for me, when I read this script, I was like, this is what I want to see on screen. This is exactly the representation I want to see of such a beautiful, intricate community because it is so specific to San Francisco and to Lisette's mother's story and to my mother. And, all of our mothers as Latinos, we do actually cross there. You know what I'm saying? And in those experiences of our grandmothers and our mothers, there's a lot of cross intersectionality. So yeah, I said yes right away.
Well, I love that you said that because, I grew up in West Texas. I come from, you're supposed to say humble beginnings. That's big word for poverty. I grew up in an impoverished situation. Those stories connect because of the work that our parents had to go through, the discrimination that they had to fight, especially the women in our lives and of course the men. But there's something particularly I guess, endearing to be about Latina women, the strength that they've had to have through everything our culture's been put through. And I mean that from Mexican American to Puerto Ricanos to Dominicanos, from white passing to Afro Latinos. We all
Hmm.
share certain things, and that's family, faith, and work ethic.
Hmm.
So watching this movie, did I cried? Did you find yourself really in tears and really in moments of joy, all three of you watching it and also during the process?
I mean, we keep saying it was blood, sweat, and tears while we were
Oh,
making it.
You had an interesting experience at the last screening, Lorenzo, with a woman and a daughter who came
Oh
just
yeah.
randomly. Should speak on
Yeah,
that.
that was intense. I
what
mean, in a good
happened?
way. In a good way. It's just what's been most rewarding about this is when we have gone out and shown it to people and screenings and such, just to see what we've been speaking about, that connection to the story, no matter where they come from, even. And there's something about, and I think that's why, even though we're speaking about this Latinidad, I also think it's a story for all. I think I hope this kind of bled through on the screen for audiences, and I felt it a little bit, but it was incredibly easy and difficult and challenging making it because I could resonate on so many levels to the experiences of
Right.
my character, and that was extremely hard for me to dive into, just because it wasn't hard. And I had to think about my mother's experience, and I had to, really go there. So there was something really special in how I didn't have to pull so hard to follow that journey. And at the same time, to now see it with people and have a woman come up to me and be like, I really connected to that. I really connected to that with my daughter and what I've gone through and my mother. And that's been a really wonderful surprise that I think I wasn't expecting.
But I'm glad that you said that, and I want you, Lisette, Lorenza, and David to know that that's something that my husband did ask me. You said something there. You said, "Well, I think anyone can watch this. Anybody can connect with this. Here's what we have to get out of our minds. It's a Latino film." No, just like you watch any movie, when you go to the movies and you connect with this character or with whatever's happening at the moment, that's this film. It just happens to be a Latino story.
You
And
just said
so
it so well.
I get so upset when we approach somebody about our show and they're like, "Well, are you going to have a Mexican revolution in the morning?" What are you talking about? No, like when I watch this movie, it's the story of America. It's the story of so many families. You can be any color from any background and you will have a connection with this film and you will feel something. And that's what makes a great movie.
Well, you said something very important there. It's a story about America, and it seems like what I'm seeing in the next couple in this generation is there's a re-understanding of what America is. We saw this with Benari, right? They're farmers, they're American farmers. They
Right.
happen to be Korean, and they got pushed into the international section. It's just silliness. It shouldn't have been. It's an American story, and it seems like we're moving into a world where we are claiming ourselves as American, and our country is starting to see us as American. And this happened throughout history. It happened to the Italians. It happened to the Irish people. It happened to the Polish people. We're just the next iteration of that assimilation. And the beauty about a film like this is that it's made from that generation, and we won't pander, and we don't even call out anything. We never even discuss that there's Latino people in the movie. They're just people, and they're existing.
Yes.
And it's been a real conversation with marketing, with publicity, with how we're describing this conversation, because we very quickly we go into a Latino box, and we have to say, as a country, we're not at a place where we're understanding that Latino means American yet. So until we get there, we're going to continue to say American.
I think that the more that we have these discussions, the more, Lisette, Lorenza, and David's that we have, that's when we start to accept or force everyone else to accept us as Americans first. Also learning our history. David and I have had brief conversations about this, and I'm really big on social media about the fact that our history has been purposely erased. You talked about, Irish and Italians. They know their history. For us, we really don't. We know about Frida Kahlo and Cesar Chavez, and then it's like nothing else happened. And
Mm.
so when you don't know your own history, you don't know how to be proud. You don't know how to discover and accept who you are. There's almost a feeling, and I know my mother felt this, and my grandmother felt almost a feeling of shame being Latino
Yes.
because they were told
Exactly.
white was better and you need to be this. And so we are rediscovering it and saying, no, 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 that's not right. That's a lie. And we're not believing it. We're going to tell our truth.
You're very right to say shame. And I use that word carefully because David and I have had it in Lorenzo, I've had this conversation too. If sometimes it seems like there's a shame in claiming ourselves. And it's not so much that I see. I see a fear of hurting your children by putting labels on them that have hurt you. And then we adopt that as their children. We adopt, my mom didn't want me to learn Spanish. She didn't want me to have an accent because of all the things that happened to her.
Yes.
And for us to say, we have to unlearn that shame in a weird way. I know I'm unlearning it. It's a daily struggle. I'm unlearning it every day, but reclaiming it in a way that feels respectful, but also feels honest to my perspective. Lorenzo and I talk about this a lot. We're Latinas from two very different parts of the world. You could speak to that, Lore. Like we had different experiences completely growing up, but we still had this connective tissue when we sat down for the script.
Which is so much part of our DNA too, as I think Latino. It's such a complex conversation. I always go back to this because we're from completely different parts of the world with completely different experiences. Mm-hmm. And it's just
David,
so
too.
Powerful to find that middle point. And like I go back to San Francisco and how you said so well and about how it's like such a melting pot of different cultures and that intersectionality of different identities and different communities of immigrants trying to make it there and becoming American in a sense and understanding that, you have an ethnicity, you have a race, and you have a place of home. And those are all different things that make part of your identity, right? And how that conversation can be, quite difficult. Yeah. But also, like you said, the erasure of history is a very, very it's a very awful thing that has been done very much on purpose to all small communities on purpose to keep us that way, to keep us divided. And so it's just really rewarding to get to put a story like this out there for everyone to watch and hopefully relate to.
Well, I loved it so much. And I know that everybody's going to love watching this on HBO. And I want to say to David, something that I try to do very often is thank the men that uplift the women in our communities, because there are so many who don't. There are so many who won't, and it matters.
Oh,
it
and this is a really good
very
one.
Much.
She's a really good one.
The best.